So welcome to Transform Gov, the podcast where we share real stories and insights into how technology and data are changing the way public services work. We talk to people who are leading the charge, in other words, those who are actually on the coalface. So Transform Gov is part of the Ireland eGovernment Awards, and it's brought to you in partnership with Accenture. I'm Maeve Kneafsey, and today we're speaking to Paula Lyons, Assistant Secretary and Head of Service for the Department of Social Protection, the division responsible for digital services, of course, and customer experience across one of Ireland's, if not biggest, one of Ireland's biggest public organisations. So Paula, you're very welcome to Transform Gov.
Hi Maeve, great to be here.
So Paula, you've worked, in several parts of the public service, right? The court service, the NSSO, and then for the last 6 years leading the service development in the Department of Social Protection. So what really drew you, I suppose, to the public sector? And there can be millions of reasons we know from all of our guests as to why somebody gets drawn to it. But then, of course, you stayed with it.
Yeah, and I actually started my career in the Department of Social Protection. At the time, it was called the Department of Social Welfare, and it has had a few different name changes in the intervening years. So I started in the department, started as an investigator in the department, and absolutely loved that job. And the great thing about that job was your closeness to the customer. So it was daily interaction with customers, making sure that people were getting the payments that they were entitled to. So lots of outdoor work and activity, but
really?
also...
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So you would go out and meet people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you were meeting people actually in their own homes, also doing inspections, employer inspections around PRSI compliance. So you're really out, I suppose, in the community.
Yeah.
So that really, I suppose, sparked the connection, I guess, with public service and seeing what good customer service actually looked like. Because until you're at that front end, I think, that's when it really hits home what good and bad looks like. So from there, I stayed with the department until 2007 and then moved to the court service. So it was 7 years in the court service, then moved to the National Shared Services Office, which runs payroll, HR shared service. And then an opportunity came to come back to the department. So I really loved the department when I was in it because it is a great, practical, can-do, active department.
Yeah.
With such a big remit. So it was great to get the opportunity to come back again. So I've been back since 2019.
And did you pick up along the way, I suppose, seeing how things could be done better? Did you think it kind of spurred you on to keep going? And what kind of areas were you really interested in?
Yeah, so as I said to you earlier, I mean, seeing what good and bad customer service looks like, I think is a real driver, and to see where you can make improvement. So understanding, the key to that, I think, is understanding what the customer needs and connection with the customer. So hearing the customer voice. So that's always been really important to me, and in the work that I've done, that just seeking out what will make something better for a customer. And I know we'll talk about digital, that's not necessarily a digital solution. So it's what does customer service in the round look like and what can make things better. So I think just that connection, understanding that and driving for improvement really is, I suppose, what attracted me and kept me, I guess, in the public service. And that plus very interesting jobs, because the thing about the civil service is, and people may not realise if you haven't worked in the civil service, is just the variety of work that's available. So even within the department that I'm in at the moment, there's a superb kind of different range of roles available. And that's really interesting. So you're not pigeonholed into one or other role, that you can move around. And the department is the largest department in the state. So big department, big remit, over 140 schemes and services, big staffing. We're probably one of the biggest employers in the country. So we have close to 7,000 staff between permanent and temporary staff. We're in 120 locations. So for example, in 2024, we would have paid over 3.5 million beneficiaries of social welfare payments. So the scale is huge.
Yeah, I mean,
huge.
I think in a way, as you said, that's so exciting, because if you look, I can make an impact. If I get this right,
absolutely,
I can make an impact. But of course, it's the other way, isn't it? When things go wrong. But I mean, like that's
that's
big,
life.
That's big organisations, isn't it?
Yeah. And I guess, like everything else, you learn from what goes wrong as much as
that's
from what
my
goes
next
right.
question.
Okay.
You must have read my script. So in terms of learnings, because people who are listening to this are either part of the journey you're on, trying to do something different. So what can you bring to them and say what you've learned just in terms of your own experience about what does and perhaps doesn't work?
So I would say what does work is, I suppose, the planning piece before you go to do anything is just that research piece at the outset, to be clear about what the scope is of what you're doing and to have some idea of what impact you're trying to make. So it's almost that kind of a baseline of where we are now, what do we want to achieve, and then critically, can we measure what comes out the other end? So I think it's just taking stock of where you are before, you make a change or you introduce a program or a project, and just be really clear about what the intention is. I suppose as a department, the interaction, the customer voice has always been strong. So it's not, again, something that is, just in more recent years. We have traditionally sought out customer input in terms of customer service groups, customer contact, a lot of customer surveys. It's a huge learning from those. Sometimes great affirmation of what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, for example, we would have had recent surveys on customer contact. So very strong, positive customer response. And they're done independently. So you're getting a good kind of benchmark from an independent company as to where you kind of fit in terms of service delivery. But then critically, what are the things, where are the pain points for customers? And they will tell you where their pain points are. And then that's really the thing you need to focus on, because you can sort of bask in the glory of the things you do well, but it's really, where are the pain points? My view in dealing with customer service is put yourself into the customer's shoes. We're all customers. And we all kind of have experienced what good and bad looks and feels like as well. So I think if you can put yourself in the customer's shoes and think about the experience that they're having, and would that be a good experience for you? And if it's not, well, it's not for the customer either. So, just bring your own life experience in as well. But that's it, just learning both good and bad, and, being able to develop your service accordingly.
And of course, there's a whole shift, isn't there? I mean, we've talked about this numerous times, but I think it's still really interesting, particularly in the area you're in, because it's such you touch on our lives in a very personal way.
Exactly.
Everybody, including yourself, right?
Exactly.
Is that change in attitude? Because I know when I was, a younger woman and I was trying to get services or figure out what I was due or wasn't due, or benefits or child benefit or whatever.
Yeah.
You always felt that there was almost a combative relationship, that, you had to prove yourself. I think there's a big shift in that. Am I right? Or is it just that there's a much more open transparency and a desire, if possible, for people to self-serve and find out the information they need?
Yeah, exactly. I suppose the first thing to say is there's more sources of information, I guess, than there would have been in the past. So I suppose the older model probably would have been people physically coming into an office or phoning up to find out information. And then again, either getting maybe good or bad service in that respect. Whereas now the sources of information are much more extensive. So people's access to information in the first place is probably better. But I think probably where we are now is looking at, again, from a sort of a life experience and life events perspective, how do you join up information? So it's not just information about one particular scheme or service, or even within the department schemes or services, but more broadly across all of the public services that apply when somebody is going through a particular experience. And it could be unemployment, it could be a person with a disability or an illness, or it could be, when somebody dies, somebody retires, somebody is born.
Yes.
So it is that, life events, and we're very much moving into that space, I suppose, of looking through that lens of how do you make better connections. That can be just even at an information level, because if you can go to one place, and gov.ie, I suppose, is that portal, where you go to look, primarily for the information around public service. If that can display for you in one place the information that you need, so the customer doesn't have to do the search is done for them and presented to them.
Yes.
Then I suppose the next challenge is how do you actually link up the services better? So there's a range of services provided, let's say, by the Department of Social Protection, but there would also be, for any one life event, a range of services probably by the health service or by another government agency. So how do you actually connect better in terms of service delivery and make a much smoother customer journey? And I think that is where there is a real challenge.
Yes, and I know that I try and use MyGov as much as I can, because just to be informed about what's happening and seeing how the different parts of the service, if you like, are connected. Was it a big challenge to integrate MyWelfare, which is your online source of information and services with MyGov. I mean, how is that? Can you give any insights you might share with somebody else who's kind of going on that journey?
So MyGov, I suppose, is primarily for information purposes around schemes and services of the public service. There's also ability also to interact with MyGov. So, for example, just going back to the customer service, there's an opportunity for people to submit customer feedback through an online form on mygov.ie. MyWelfare is the online service particularly for the Department of Social Protection. So it's where you can actually apply then for service. But if you flip it back to MyGov and you look at it through that life events approach, you know, the perfect solution there is actually that connection. It is to be able to say, okay, I can see that there's a scheme or service that applies for me. Can I apply directly from the portal that I'm on rather than maybe having to leave that portal and jump to MyWelfare? So that's the kind of area we're in. You know, in the context of the national national digital strategy rather and the digital services plan, this is the territory really that you know we're deep into now. How do we make those connected services, and how does that happen? And of course, where are the blockers in achieving that? So I think that is certainly top of the list, top of the priority to try and
Well, look, it's a good time
progress.
for me to take a little quick pause because I've got to take a break for a message from somebody important, which is basically our partner Accenture. So don't go away. We'll be back in about 2 seconds.
Through the power of cloud, data and AI, Accenture is helping the public sector by blending human ingenuity, technology and a delivery-focused culture to turn their ambitions into action. Be ready for any challenge by adopting a continuous reinvention mindset to deliver human-centric services that adapt and grow with your needs. Contact the team at Accenture to find out more.
So during COVID, the DSP really had a huge visible role because of, you had to suddenly respond really, really quickly, right?
Correct.
And, you know, everything had to be online. So when you kind of step back from that now, do you think there were things you learned really about kind of how agile the public sector could be when it needed to be? And then maybe some of them you've kind of held on to. Or was it difficult to hold on to them post-COVID?
Yeah, so I suppose the first thing to say is absolutely the response needed to be quick. It needed to be the response that was needed relative to the very serious situation that we found ourselves in so quickly. So the pandemic unemployment payment, I suppose, is the real classic example here of a very agile solution to that problem of people being, you know, asked to stay at home and not being able to go into work. That started actually as a physical application.
Okay.
Yeah. So initially it was, but literally within a week or two, the online service was developed and delivered.
I mean, that's phenomenal.
It's phenomenal, but I suppose if you think about it, you know, it probably was a relatively straightforward payment in that the rates were kind of set and, you know,
It was common for everybody.
Yeah, there wasn't the same level of probably complexity that you would find with other schemes, particularly where somebody has to, you know, there's further eligibility criteria and there's the requirement to satisfy, you know, more complex kind of conditions. So it was relatively, I suppose, straightforward compared to other schemes, but nonetheless stood up really quickly. So I think, look, the ability to do it, you know, is reassuring, you know, that agile response is possible. And I think it has also prompted probably just the, you know, that consideration of if we were able to, you know, respond quickly to a service requirement, you know, where can we go from here? How can we do things better and quicker? And of course, technology does really help in that space. And, you know, if you think about it, if we had been trying to manage the COVID unemployment payments merely through paper applications and people having physically to come to an office,
never would have happened.
It couldn't have happened.
No, I mean, it would have been an awful place.
Yeah, so really the technology, I suppose, is one of the key enablers. And I suppose that's where in the space I'm in at the moment, in the area of responsibility that I have, developing digital service is really a critical, you know, I suppose responsibility for the department now to make sure that our schemes and services are available online. The one thing though that is interesting, I suppose, about the approach that the department takes is it's digital by desire as opposed to you must use a digital solution. But our, I suppose, approach is to make sure that the digital services that we develop are of a really high quality and therefore that people will opt to use them and find them really user-friendly. And, that word will spread, I suppose, around this being the easiest way to apply for something.
Exactly. And I know that because you've got some people who are going to take your services who really are not comfortable with technology.
Sure.
But yet you managed it in COVID. People got around it. Are you finding that the uptake, because I'm guessing you answered the question, but I'm guessing it soared, obviously, the uptake of online services during COVID. Is that being sustained post-COVID? Are people, really adopting to using online as a preferred way of communicating with you?
Yeah. So I suppose, yes, I would say the answer to that question is yes, but it's growing. It's not a static number. And it depends on the service as well, sometimes as to how quickly that grows. So we keep a really close watch on that, because one aspect that you can't forget either is, in terms of the staff of the department, it's really important that digital adoption is something that people really buy into as well. So that if you're advising a customer, that you're knowledgeable enough yourself about how the online service operates, so that you can guide the customer and show them how it is easier if they want to make a change, perhaps on their claim in relation to, a change of address or something, that they're able to do it online, rather than people feeling they have to phone up or they have to come into an office and maybe putting themselves out where they could just simply do that online. So it's really critical, that adoption piece. As much as you want the public to adopt digital, it's also important that we have a digital adoption approach with staff. And that's part of the work that we do as well, is training our staff. So before a scheme or service is put online, that we do, training sessions with the staff in the area where that scheme is going to be administered from, so they're really comfortable with,
actually walking through, this is what you do, I've done it myself, you apply here, that's where you go next, you'll get this in the post. Whatever.
Absolutely, because sometimes it's just a confidence issue for people, if they haven't used the service before, and they just may be reticent about, will I do something wrong?
Particularly something that's a public service. You think, I put something down wrong and it'll be there forever and it's completely wrong and they're going to think I'm a thief. I know, I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean?
That's it. Like people's sort of maybe avoidance of something that actually would be much easier for them, just for want of knowing kind of how to do it. So as I say, having that ability and digital adoption sort of perspective and mindset within the staff of the department really important as well. So we do spend time and energy on that as well.
I suppose the balance is, on the one side, right, there's a role for your department particularly, right, we've got to make sure that people who need benefits or they're getting their pension payment or they need to find out some information about anything, registering a birth, let's say, that they've got access to the service and it's easy to do if they choose to do it online. On the other side, there's a responsibility to make sure people are legitimately qualified, I suppose, for a benefit. Are you always trying to juggle this balance in terms of the whole service online?
Yeah, and it's no different. Just because it's online doesn't really make it any different than an in-person service. That balance still needs to be there. But I suppose if your starting point is that people are honest and go from there, but put in the right controls. So you have reviews and you have, control points at which you are, making sure that the conditions are being satisfied, but not to prevent or block payments on the understanding that people are not going to be honest. Because the reality is that most people actually are honest. And
this is so funny. It's exactly the conversation that I had with John Barron from Revenue Commissioners.
Oh, really?
He said, we start, like you were saying, from the position that people are honest, and in most cases they are.
Yeah. And the reviews that we do would demonstrate that as well, that there isn't a significant, when you go through a review process, that you're not actually pulling payments back from people. The more important thing, I think, is that people know what they're entitled to. Because of the range, and on the one hand, really positive that there's such an extensive range of schemes and services. But then we're back to information. How do you get that information to people? How do you make sure that people know what the range of entitlements that they may have and make that easy? Yeah. So again, we're kind of coming around. It's sort of a circular conversation because we're back to looking at service development in that kind of life kind of perspective or life events way.
And I mean, even down to the basic stuff, right? I remember when the citizen information site first went live and I thought, oh my God, you can actually read this. It's plain English.
Sure.
But that's very hard to maintain, when you're inside an organisation. It's even if you use ChatGPT, right? And let's say my area would be, digital strategy and transformation. And I put something in, the amount of jargon I get back from it. So I keep having to go, could you please do that in plain English? I presume that's a challenge all the time.
Yeah, so part of the area that I work with is our customer service team and unit and that customer experience. And that's really a huge focus for us is how do we present information in plain English? Both in terms of like information guides or leaflets, but also on, whether it's online or whether it's physical form. Because that, again, can be very confusing to people. If the language is getting in the way, again, people, may give up even making an application because they don't quite understand what it is that is being looked for.
People are often embarrassed to even ask the question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when, I suppose, just to explain, the process as well from a digital perspective, and this gives you an opportunity to look at how do you present information. So if you look at how you do it in a physical form, and then you look at how will the customer navigate that online, and add in a customer input to that, which is part of how we design our service. So our services are designed from a customer-centric perspective. So we actually involve our customers. So we'll often find there are questions that don't make sense or maybe that are repetitive. And it actually facilitates both a better online form and also to make kind of adjustments or corrections to the paper version. So there's sort of a win-win there.
Yes, I get you. I know that Pauline Tracy from the Dublin City Council was saying that, trying to kind of just replicate an offline into online process is illogical because sometimes why it was done a certain way is nothing to do with today or how people like to do things or anything that actually makes sense in a flow.
Yeah.
So is that what you're kind of saying? That's what you do?
Absolutely. Because I think, if you're navigating an online service, there has to be a flow to the questions and it does have to make sense to people. So they're not sort of tempted to go backwards instead of forwards in terms of...
It's not linear.
Yeah. So, and I think again, and I know I'm repeating myself, but because I think it's so important that customer-centric approach is taken. So when we're designing a service, the voice of the customer is right in there. And that really helps to understand, if you're looking at it from a customer perspective and there is a question that's unclear or ambiguous, to get that sorted out before you make the service live, really, really valuable, And that, when you look at that, then when it comes out the other end and you do your customer engagement, your customer surveys, and we have a really high rate, it's over 85% satisfaction on the use of MyWelfare.
That's brilliant.
Because it's designed in a very user-friendly way and flows. And that, I would say, is very largely down to that customer input back at the other end when you're actually designing the service.
And I suppose ongoing feedback as well. Because when people say, I'd love your feedback, rather than saying, we need your feedback if you want this to be any better. Do people do that? Do they give you feedback?
Yeah, they can, absolutely. There's an opportunity to do that. And that is not just in relation to those formal customer service, but also, in the course of a claim as they're progressing. So, yeah, absolutely. And look, all feedback is really welcome because, look, as we said earlier, that's what makes the product better.
Yeah, we're not operating in a vacuum, or sure we're not.
No, and you can be, I suppose, the longer, I suppose, you're away from the customer voice, the harder it is to put yourself into that position of somebody actually trying to complete a form. So the keeping in touch with that is really critical, so that you're getting that really, strong voice in that helps us then to make the best service. So
we talked earlier about the digital strategy and the objective, I suppose, or the vision of trying to get 30% of relevant services online, digitized. Okay, and if people choose to do that. But you're also talking about life events. So you must be knee deep now into life events. So tell us about your experience in that or how you're approaching it. Because it requires, doesn't it, a lot of, as you say, thinking through what is going to satisfy the needs, understanding the needs, how you're going to satisfy them digitally, and then integrating other information from other departments through. So how have you had some sort of framework that you're working to that other people can learn from? Yeah.
So first of all, I suppose just on the ambition of the digital strategy, and it is in line with the National Digital Strategy and the forthcoming Digital Services Plan. We will have 90% of services by 2030 is the ambition. Okay, so it's 90% availability. We're saying digital by desire, but with a very high expectation in terms of usage, and we can see that as we develop our services. When we look at it through the lens of life events, and this is very much supported from, I suppose, centrally from the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform,
Yeah.
and involving, multiple organisations and agencies across the public service. So it's not that the Department of Social Protection is doing the heavy lifting all on its own.
Yeah.
And of course, that's very important that we're part of that bigger public service picture and how services work. I would say, Maeve, we're at the start of that planning process, so I can't give you all of the answers yet. What we have done, and in looking at one particular event, I suppose, just to give you an example, so the birth of a child, okay? So we've done a fairly extensive exploratory piece on that. So literally mapping a customer journey in the experience of having a child. So that's from pre-birth through birth, the services then that kick in, and up to, I suppose, school or creche going age, that kind of territory. And looking really at, again, where are the pain points? Where might the customer drop off as well in terms of the service offer? And that could be from a knowledge perspective, or how can, as I said earlier, how can we join services up? That's going to require a lot of, I suppose, conversation with the other organisations that are involved in that service delivery, and to see where can we share information that helps the customer, not having to repeatedly give different organisations the
same information.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So that brings you into, of course, a whole space around data protection, around making sure that you have the right agreements for data sharing. And that's really important, because at the end of the day, what we need to have here is customer trust as well. So there's no fear on the customer's part that information given is going to be information that's not used properly. So that's key. So that transparency of how information is received and used. But ultimately, I think that data sharing across organisations is sort of unlocks the key then to that better service delivery, because it makes it a more streamlined journey. And the problem traditionally for customer services, just as you've expressed there, is the same information being given repeatedly across a variety of organisations. Yeah. So the life events approach is looking at 17 different life events. So it's very extensive and comprehensive.
Yeah.
And over a period of the forthcoming 3 or 4 years, to see how can we work through those different life events. Our department, Department of Social Protection, will be involved in some, not all. So there's a significant number of departments and agencies that will be part of this journey as well. But it's exciting as well, in terms
it could
of what
transform
you can do. Absolutely.
People's experience.
Absolutely.
Right? Even now, registering a birth or any sort of significant change, like if you're getting married or death, all of those things are far easier. I mean, they used to, firstly, people didn't know what to do. And secondly, there was nowhere you could find out what to do. Whereas now you could not only find out what to do, but you can do it online,
Yeah, and it's building that online offering as well, because that's part of what you see. And when we did that mapping exercise, part of what we looked for was how many of these services actually are online. So they aren't all online. There are plans, it's not that there's no plans, there are plans, but it's not a fully online service end to end. So that's where the customer kind of can fall out of what otherwise might be an online journey. Yeah. So, and of course, data sharing, etc., much easier in the context of an online experience as well.
Anything new you can tell us coming down the track to expect soon in terms of new services, digital services online? I know that on a more strategic level, it's life events. But anything you're working on?
So, in the department, I suppose we have a roadmap that we are working towards, and that brings us up to the 2030, I suppose, target. And what we're working on at the moment are some of our, what we call our longer term schemes. So schemes like disability allowance, invalidity pension. They're big schemes, and, so to get those up and running with an online service will be a great achievement. So that's going to come in 2026.
Okay.
So there's quite a lot of work that goes in from the start, from the conception of a scheme to it being delivered online, But the picture builds
as it goes. Right, I know. I was talking recently to a couple of different podcasts. One of them was with Richard Corbridge, who used to be the head of e-health under the HSE, and he's now working in the UK. But when he was working in the UK on the pensions side of things, they built in a system where they used AI to evaluate all handwritten as well as email communications to kind of get the ones that are really urgent at the top of the pile. Now, I know that's only one example, but are you looking already using AI in that kind of a role?
So I suppose it depends, like how you define AI as well. So we would use process automation, robotic process automation within our services, but very much where there is a positive decision. So if there's any decision that's likely to be a negative decision for a customer, they always are reviewed by a human. Okay.
Yeah.
So depending again on the scheme and complexity, some schemes have a fairly, more straightforward eligibility and can be automatically processed. And of course, from a customer perspective, that means a quicker turnaround time from the time of claim to decision. When you step in then, I suppose, to generative AI, and of course everybody's talking about this.
Yeah.
At the moment, I suppose what we're doing is a number of pilots, but we're in a very low risk space, which we need to be. We need those guardrails high for the moment. So it's really looking at how we can manage our own information. So internally, in terms of information that staff need, whether it's to make decisions on claims or more generally in terms of schemes or services to help customers, perhaps customer contact centres, to look at how AI can help. Because sometimes if you're a customer contact agent, trying to find information to be able to help the customer in a very quick turnaround, can be a challenge as well. So it's to look at how AI can help. But look, I mean, who knows how far and quickly we can progress, but we want to make sure that what we do, we get right. And again, we're back to the trust issue, and that if we're giving information, particularly to customers, based on using AI, that again, it's accurate.
Yes.
So that you're not misleading people.
No.
So look, I think that is.
I mean, are there pilots that you're doing that I know that's because you have to get to the stage where you trust the capability of the AI to deliver correctly.
So there are a couple of pilots happening internally in the department at the moment. So look, we see ourselves growing.
You're not telling me what they are, though.
So it is as it's described. So if you're a customer contact agent, and you have to access a range of information that's internal to the department.
Yes.
To find the answer to a question that the customer has asked. How quickly can you access that information? At the moment, depending on the question, that could be very quickly, or it might take you some time to find the information that you need. So what we're looking at is deploying AI to look at, how the information within the department that's curated within the department can bring that answer, if you like, back to a customer agent
quickly. Yeah.
Essentially.
Makes perfect sense.
So, and the reason that I'm saying it's low risk at the moment is because it is purely information that's held within the department. So it's not looking kind of at broader sources of information. But there's still a huge amount of information held within the department, So that whole data management piece is absolutely critical to how we move forward in AI as well. So we're in the process of developing a data strategy. So that's very much linked to how we will progress from an AI perspective, because you need to make sure that your data is in order. It's a really critical must-have dependency.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beginning and the end of it, really, isn't it? That's right.
Well, it's really critical. It's a high dependency to have your data as you need it,
In terms of, digital transformation, we know that kind of IT, policy and the frontline operations are all having to come together. There has to be a synchronization between them to really be effective.
Sure.
Any things that you've learned along the way that kind of keep people focused and I suppose motivated without at the same time being overwhelmed about what has to be delivered? What kind of things have you learned?
I suppose it's important for people to see what the direction of travel is, so that people don't feel disconnected from a project or a policy, but can see how their contribution feeds into what could be a really good outcome.
Okay, so where's my place in the wheel?
Where's my place in the wheel? What do I need to do to make that wheel turn? And particularly, let's say, for my area, which is on digital service design, really critical to have those connections from one side, on the business side, for the areas of the department that are delivering service, and also with our technical colleagues. So there's a real fusion team approach, I suppose, and partnership within how we work together to make sure that we have the right outcome. I think if people understand what they're trying to achieve, it makes that much easier to stay committed and motivated to a project. That's true. Of course, when you see progress,
So what mechanisms do you then use to make sure that happens? Do you customer journey mapping is one way of doing it. Workshops is another way. Yeah. How do you kind of...
Lots of that. Like lots of engagement, lots of workshopping. So the right people are around the table giving the right input and the right voices are being heard. So absolutely, that engagement, just that simple one-to-one or in bigger groups. Really important that people engage with each other to see, as I say, to see that clarity of what we're trying to achieve. And as you said, where's my place within that as well? So I think that's really critical. Yeah, and to have, I suppose, well-defined what you're trying to achieve. I said that at an earlier point as well.
What are we trying to do?
Just that. What are we trying to do? And what are we trying to fix? Okay, so what is it actually? What is the problem statement that we're trying to fix or that we're trying to develop? So that again, there's clarity on direction travel.
Do you take an agile approach? I mean this in the sense that, look, to have the perfect service online, it'll take us a long time. But we'll start with step A, and then it'll get better and better. Or do you tend to hold back and wait for too much further on? What's your?
I think there's certainly, I suppose, an agile approach is generally how we would approach projects within the department. That's for sure. So you learn as you go. And I think that is true. Although I would think there's also a minimum, viable product that you must meet as well. So you can't really afford to be too loose, I suppose, with the product when it's going out for use by people who need the service.
For example, if you make that real, are there ones that you started off with a fairly good but basic service and then added to, or?
Yeah, so I suppose any of the schemes that we have put online to date. So for example, let's say the scheme for job seekers. Okay, so you start maybe with a product that makes sure that all the main parts of that claim eligibility are covered. But then you add in, for example, what we call a platform service. So then I can change an address or I can update if I have, a new child or whatever it is, so that as the scheme is being developed, additional service is added. So that initial product would have been released just with the ability to apply for a claim, and subsequently then this, platform service where you can apply or you can make changes to that claim come into play. So that really is, I suppose, a good example of where, and that's a point as well, I suppose, just to say, even where a claim is not yet online. So take, for example, your disability allowance claim that isn't yet online to be able to make a claim. The development of those sort of build, share or platform services allow customers actually to inform us via an online service where they have something to tell us rather than having to write in to us.
Yeah.
Okay, so that, if you like, some of the functionality goes ahead of the scheme being built as well, which again I think shows a really agile approach that if we have some good product, we're not sort of holding it back until everything is ready in the one scheme that we're releasing it kind of more broadly. So I think,
iteration.
That's our approach, yeah.
In terms of, look, forget about politics and, what is and isn't possible. But if you were to look down the road, maybe 3 years, what would you love to see happening for our citizens in terms of how the department works and what it offers? What would be great for you if you could dream a bit?
Yeah.
Don't worry about budgets at the moment.
Yeah, look, I think probably, where we are in looking at that broader streamlining of services, like that is a 3-year programme effectively, We're taking a lead on 2 events, in terms of the birth
life
event.
events. Yeah.
Life events, on the birth of a child and supporting people who are bereaved. So I think just seeing within that kind of a time span how the current service, which maybe, as we said earlier, maybe a little, jolty or broken and people have some access to online service and some not, and that connection across public service agencies. If we had a really good offering for those 2 life events, that would be really rewarding, I think, to have been involved in that development. And that from an information perspective and also from a scheme and service development, I think would be a good 3 years'
We'd
work.
all be cheering. We'd all be cheering.
3 years'
Absolutely
work.
good. Yeah. And just in terms of, for you personally, what have you had most satisfaction from in terms of what you've delivered? And obviously we're talking about digital.
Yeah.
That you go, wow, that really made a big difference. It's worth doing my job.
Yeah. I'm not going to pick out one. I just think seeing how the online service has been developed over the last number of years and just how that brings a greater access for people, I think I'd take comfort and pleasure in. And then also from the customer service perspective, so outside of digital, also looking at how we have improved customer service generally. So just with a broader focus, and again, digital by desire, but also making sure that, if people choose to access services in a different way, that we're also keeping an eye on that we're not forgetting. Leave nobody behind, as they say.
It's true.
Yeah.
But mind you, you're probably seeing even within your own teams, right, that the digital natives are now becoming the core of your employees. Because so many people that are in the workforce now grew up with digital.
Yeah,
sure.
So
it's supposed that everything's changing.
And I think, apart from the digital natives, I think just generally, I mean, for all generations at this point, I think just the use of technology has grown so much that everybody has a certain level of comfort, for sure. But I suppose it's just that, again, that balance that's always important, just not to make an assumption that people, either want to or are fully comfortable with the use of technology. So it's just keeping an eye on, as I say, that we're not leaving people behind, because the remit of the department at the end of the day is to serve everybody that is our customer, regardless of how they get to us, and whether that's digital or in another shape or form.
True,
we provide the best service.
Very true. Well, look, it's fascinating, and like I think you're only at the beginning in a way. I mean, I know there's lots being done, but I suppose there's technologies now that are accelerating as well as the strategy which are accelerating.
Sure.
So I think you'll be coming back and telling us more, I hope. Maybe you'll be close to what you want before the 3 years are up. But look, thank you so much for joining us on Transform Gov.
Thanks very much, Maeve. It's a pleasure.
Good. Well, look, we've got a few other important people to thank, which is the team here behind Transform Gov, the studio team. So I want to say thank you to Peter Rice, who's our studio manager, Neil Horner, who's our video editor, Lee Brennan, who's sound engineer, and we have been helped by Lee and his colleague, who's a videographer today, but I'm afraid I don't have his name, but I'm going to find out. And thank you all for listening, and we look forward to you joining us again on the next episode of Transform Gov.